Welcome to Six Flags Darien Lake in Corfu, New York. Now, we've been here before many years ago, but enough stuff has changed in the park that I wanted to do a little update. You can see the slingshot, those are those two steel towers there in front of you, and the big tent is the security checkpoint, and beyond that is the actual entrance. So let's just go forward through the entrance and onto the main midway. And there is the main entrance, and there's only one place to go from here, and that's straight ahead. Now it's interesting, you see the sign on the bridge, Six Flags, and you can barely see Darien Lake underneath it. That says a lot about the approach that the company has to this park. It's been one of our favorite parks for a long time, and it's been slipping. Just notice the amount of blacktop in this place, as opposed to some place like Six Flags New England or Great Escape, which has a variety of different types of pavement. But here, everything is blacktop. And it felt to me like the park had just been completely forgotten by the chain. You'll see that there are a lot of things that just aren't open. And I think it's starting to show. It also, I think, was telling that there was a big sandwich board out front of the park that said any use of marijuana would mean immediate ejection from the park. So, I don't know, have they had a lot of people coming here high? I have no idea, but it's very strange. And you'll notice there are very, very few people in this park. And this was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, and normally you should see a lot of people in this park. But as you'll see, there's really wasn't much to do. So there we have the fountain in the center. That's sort of a landmark, and when you see the fountain, you know you're right near the exit. Over here is the Perry's ice cream shop, and they have really good ice cream there. I had a, what was it? A caramel bourbon pecan ice cream, and it was just incredible. So around here, well, there's a big fence hiding nothing. You'll see there's a lot of nothing in this area. There are a couple of flat rides off to the left, you know, a paratrooper, Enterprise, things you normally see at any type of carnival. Way in the distance you can see Sky Screamer. We'll be seeing that closer in a little bit. But there's just this wide expanse of nothing. And we're going to make a sort of counterclockwise a tour through the park. And I say sort of because we have to take a few little detours here and there. The park used to have a very circular route that you could take around the whole thing. And for some reason, Six Flags has decided that's not a good idea, and they've blocked off that circle so you can now not really get from one end of the park to the other very easily. Over here is Shipwreck Falls, the Shoot the Chutes ride that doesn't really put out much of a splash. You don't get very wet on it. Over on the left here is Beaver Brothers Bay, which is a children's play area. The yellow ride in front of you is Corn Popper. And then over on the left is Rolling Thunder, which is the typical Six Flags stock Larson giant loop. And they always count it as a roller coaster, even though it technically isn't a roller coaster. The green track that you can see off to the right is Tantrum, which is a Gerstlauer looping coaster. And the green and red track in the distance used to be Mind Eraser. And I say used to be, and you'll find out why in a minute. Over here is Potato Works, so you can get French fries, obviously. The park opened in 1964. It actually started as a swimming hole. Darien Lake itself is man-made, They dug it out, they filled it with water, and people would come and swim in it. And then a guy named Paul Snyder bought 1,000 acres of land around that lake, which also includes a few other lakes, and began offering a campground, and then gradually built up more and more rides in it. So over here normally would be the entrance to Mindy Racer, but unfortunately Mindy Racer has been erased. It looks like it's not going to open. It's all boarded up. So there's a giant coaster out there in the distance that you can't ride. This coaster, however, you can ride. This is Viper, one of the greatest aero looping coasters that has ever been built. It's still a really good ride with some interesting elements in it and a tunneled helix. It's a lot of fun. There's a flying scooter ride themed to bumblebees. And there's a Kitty Dodgem car, Raccoon Rally. And I just want to go around here and take a look at this sign. It's interesting. It makes it look like a whole area. Rowdy's Ridge. But in Rowdy's Ridge, there's really only one ride. And actually, well, I mean outside of the flying scooter ride, it really is a good ride. It's actually one of my favorite rides in the park. And I've never seen another one like it. While you'd think the park mascot would be the Beaver Brothers, since they're everywhere, this moose seems to be everywhere, and this is Moose on the Loose. And it's essentially a monorail antique car ride with a bucking moose. Anyone can ride it. It's not a kiddie ride, and it's pretty extensive. Moose, moose, moose on the loose. It's not really all that fast. It's a pretty slow ride, but it's quite enjoyable. Darien Lake has gone through a lot of hands over the years. In 1983, Paul Snyder sold a 50% stake in the park to Funtime, which owned Geauga Lake and Wyandotte Lake. And they brought in some more rides. And then in 1995, Premier Parks bought Funtime and inherited Darien Lake. And they began developing it up. That little white building is the public safety building, and to the right of that was the entrance to the big arena where they have musical acts. And there's a smoking station. So as many of you probably know, Premier bought Six Flags, and so they became a Six Flags park. And that's when really big changes started to happen here. You really started to see it become a typical Six Flags park with the Six Flags rides, like the Mindy Racer that you see at almost all Six Flags parks. But they did one thing that was a revelation at the time, and that was put in Intamin's first hypercoaster, Superman Ride of Steel. And it was an amazing ride. I rode it when it first opened, and I was blown away. I had never had that much airtime on a coaster. And have it be so smooth. So, and after that, of course, you saw these Intamin hypercoasters everywhere, including Millennium Force at Cedar Point and all over the place. So that really is where most of the buildup of the park came, was from Six Flags. But then in 2011, Six Flags sort of walked away from Darien Lake, and Hershend Entertainment, Hershend runs Dollywood among many other parks, they took over and they ran it for a few years, and then they dumped the park, and the next owner was in 2014. It went back to Premier Parks, who no longer was one of the owners of Six Flags anymore. Premier Parks was its own entity. And so Premier Parks took it over again for a few years, and actually that's when it really started to become a wonderful park. They began really taking care of it, putting beautiful plantings everywhere and sprucing it up and adding some really nice theming. There's the entrance to Viper, by the way. So they did a wonderful job with it. And then they gave it back to Six Flags, which was now no longer in Premier's hands. Six Flags was an independent company now, basically controlled by an investment firm. And so Premier Parks gave up control. And now the park really doesn't have the pizzazz that it used to. And I felt really sad about that. There's, ironically, a low sensory zone in a Six Flags park. So here's one of the lakes. This is not Darien Lake, but this is one of the lakes in the park. And there's the Sea Dragon. Over on the right here is a bumper car arena for adults. The other one was a kiddie bumper car. And way in the distance, you can see two roller coasters. The white and yellow one is Moto Coaster, which is a really neat Vekoma sort of, it's Hagrid's motorbike basically before they made Hagrid's motorbike. It's, you sit like a motorcycle and you get launched into this track. It was a prototype ride that Darien Lake acquired, and it's a unique experience if you've never ridden one. It's a lot of fun. Now over here, here's one of the big turns of Viper. That big building used to be a nightmare at Crack Axle Canyon, one of the indoor roller coasters that Six Flags built. Premier actually built it. Now there's nothing inside it, and it's used for Halloween events for a fun house. There's Sky Screamer. In front of us is Tin Lizzie's, the antique car ride that just goes around this empty grassy area. And there is a walkway over the antique cars to get you to Moto Coaster. Now, once you're at Moto Coaster, there's nothing to do. You have to come all the way back. You used to be able to go around to the Boomerang Coaster over there just by cutting across. But for some reason this year, and I don't know why, they stationed security guards there. And you can't get out of the park. Well, you can get out of the park. They stamp your arm. And then the only way to get back in is to walk all the way over where the Boomerang Coaster is. And there's a tent, which you'll see later. And you can get back in at the tent. But you cannot get back in the way you went out. Also, that area out there is a sort of small midway with shops that look sort of like rustic cabins. And they were shops that were aimed at the campers because it has such a huge campground, one of the largest in New York. And campers could get their supplies and everything there. And it also had the Beaver Brothers Cafe, which was the best eatery in the park and one of the best eateries I had ever been to in any park. All that was closed. So if you went out that exit, it was just a dead area with nothing open. And the only thing you could do was walk around to that tent by the Boomerang Coaster and get back in. Made absolutely no sense to me. Why would you close an incredibly good restaurant? I don't know. So here we are, coming alongside that lake on another area of the park that is called the Boardwalk. It used to have a better theming to it, but it's been altered since then. And here's something that you rarely find anymore in an amusement park. These used to be everywhere. A fascination parlor. It's like bingo, electronic bingo. And you can see it's not all that popular. But it's interesting they still have one. That was really huge in the 1960s and 70s. So we're going to continue along this stretch of Midway here alongside the lake. And at least we have a little bit of shade here, which is nice. And you might notice, if you remember the last video that I did, that something is missing here. The park used to be the owner of what at one time was the tallest Ferris wheel in the world. It was a wonderful ride that gave beautiful panoramic views. And once Six Flags retook ownership of the park, they got rid of the Ferris wheel because that's what Six Flags does. It gets rid of family rides and puts in thrill rides. So what you have now is an upcharged sky coaster in place of the Ferris wheel. So this area that was known as the Boardwalk, that's what's there. And over here on the left are a set of eateries that used to have a nice variety of food, and now it's pretty much the usual Six Flags, hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken strips, and pizza. Karen and I, the only thing we could eat in the park was a pizza, so we each got the pizza basket, which was pizza with a bag of chips and a small drink. So slice of pizza, bag of chips, small drink, $42 for both of us, which to me is extortion. That is just insane. There's a drop tower. Over here is a carousel. The carousel is interesting because it was built in 1981 by International Amusement Devices, a company that you normally don't associate with building carousels. But it's a nice one. There's no band organ, it's just recorded music, but it serves its purpose. I think the pavilion could be a little bit bigger, though. It's a little cramped. So let's head back this way, hugging to the right. There goes the Boomerang, which has the old Premier Parks name. They used to call their boomerangs Boomerang Coast to Coaster, and that never changed. Anchor Bar used to be a really good barbecue eatery. I'm not sure what's in there now. We didn't check it out. I like this moose head with all the license plates on it. And on this side, roamed here or didn't roam here. And of course, roamed here is checked because you obviously are there. Now in front of you is indeed the park's namesake. That is Darien Lake in front of you, the biggest lake in the park. There's that white tent I was talking about, where if you go out, that's the way you get back in, and you have to pass through a security checkpoint again. And the thing that was sad to me is you used to be able to simply walk around this area, and out here is a series of paths along the lake. Very picturesque and very relaxing, and you really can't get there anymore. I mean, you have to get a hand stamp and get out of the park, and then you have to go through security and get back into the park. And it also strikes me as weird because that's the path you take if you're staying at the Darien Lake Lodge, which is their actually a very beautiful hotel that they have out on the lake. And when last time Karen and I were here, that's where we stayed, was at the lodge, and we just walked right over into the park. Here's a scrambler. This wooden coaster here we'll talk about in a minute, and if you go underneath it here, there is Ride of Steel. Superman's gone now, it's just called Ride of Steel. And it still is a pretty good ride. It's riding a little rough, but it still packs a wallop of airtime. It has a really peculiar layout, too. I don't like it as much as the one at Six Flags New England, which I think is Intamin's masterpiece. This one was sort of a test run. There's that huge camelback hill that you can see out there, but after that you have this gigantic double helix, then a flat run across the lake, which to me made no sense, and then you come back into another helix, and then the bunny hops, and the bunny hops are the fun thing. I really love those. And then over down there is just a dead end with a little food stand. So let's head back in this direction. There's a swing ride. There goes the Power Shot Tower. So the other big coaster in this park is Predator. And Predator is probably the greatest wooden coaster that Curtis Summers ever designed. It really was a fun ride when it was built. And it began to suffer from the usual maintenance headaches. And of course, when Six Flags takes over a wooden ride, it doesn't usually end well. Well, it ended well here because they're simply not opening it. But they did replace a lot of track on here with what's called Titan track, which is steel track. So it turned a wooden coaster into a sort of hybrid steel wood coaster. And I suspect they're going to be replacing more of the track because it's just easier for them to maintain it. It won't be a wooden coaster anymore, but they won't have to worry about dealing with wooden track, which is sort of sad because it was a really great ride. Now, coming up on the right, that big building is the Grand Theater, which at one point had shows in it. And now, as seems to be Six Flags' current trend, there's nothing in it. It's just a big empty building. Maybe it's used for Halloween. I don't know. Everything seems to be geared toward Halloween now. But yeah, so there's no entertainment. If you go to the Darien Lake website and check on entertainment, they say, stay tuned, we're going to announce entertainment. But they haven't. Down there, it used to be a really good restaurant. It's now called the Parents Patio. And it's not even listed on the park's website. So I don't even know what it is. I think it's a bar for adults who just are sick of the park. I don't know. There's the fountain, which means we're getting back to the entrance. And the only thing left is over here on the right. It is Hurricane Harbor, which is the big water park. And that is a huge draw here. Most of the people who come go to the water park. And it's, your typical water slides, wave pool. And there's the old hanging shark. That's at almost every Six Flags park. And that pretty much wraps up our tour. I wish I could say nicer things about Darien Lake because I used to love this park in the old days. It really had a charm to it, and it had really good rides, a lot of family rides. And even through its many changes of ownership, it maintained its character. It was always very clean, had good food, and I really have no clue what Six Flags is doing with this place, and maybe they don't either. We'll see what happens now that there's the merger. So Six Flags and Cedar Fair are now one company, so maybe the park will get a little love. I have no idea. I hope it does, because it really is an amazing resource, especially with that gargantuan campground next to it. You'd think they'd want to do a little more with it to make it more of an attraction. There's certainly enough space to build on. I wish they'd get rid of some of this blacktop and give us something else to walk on. But other than that, if you are in the upstate New York area near Buffalo, that's where Darien Lake is. If you have a Six Flags season pass, it's a free entry, so you might want to check it out. Superman Ride of Steel, is actually really good. And Predator, when it's running well, is really good. So there are a couple of good coasters here. And, Darien misses you already, so you might want to pay a visit and cheer them up.